I end up here? I am sitting in the dirt, out in the middle of nowhere, waiting for someone to pick me up. How did I let myself get into this? I was raised a city kid by two parents who themselves were raised as city kids. We were the family who took the tour bus around Yosemite rather than scaling Half Dome. We stayed at a nice motel rather than camping. We preferred the symphony to whitewater rafting. We just weren't outdoorsy kinds of people. It's not to say we didn't have our connection to nature. We did. At the house where I grew up in Los Angeles, we had our pond. It was the low spot in the asphalt in the street of my house. And when the neighbors would water their grass, the water would come gushing down the gutters and into our pond, filling it up pretty deep, like an inch or two. And then we would grab leaves off the trees and stick little twigs in, and we would race our boats down the rushing gutters into the pond. It was so fun. It was just like Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, I swear. I was a happy, confident kid with very little reason to be. I mean, I was gangly. All elbows and knees and feet. I had glasses, I had the buck teeth, the full catastrophe. A lot of people said I reminded them of Jerry Lewis. But I thought I was all that. And I think that confidence came from my mother. She would sit with me every day after school. She would be in her chair and I was on the couch, and I would give her a blow-by-blow description of what happened to me that day at school. And she would sit in rapt attention as if I were the most fascinating person on the planet. So Mr. Bell was talking to Mark Regis and Pat Dempsey before school this morning about last night's Laker game. And I told him that we had gone to last night's Laker game at the Fabulous Forum. And Mr. Bell really likes that because he always calls it the Fabulous Forum. And I think he likes it that I'm a girl and I know about sports, because later he let me take down the bulletin board because I was done with my spelling. Wow, that sounds fun. It was. And then at first recess, I played jacks with Julie Denton. She is so good. Well, you know, honey, we haven't played jacks on the kitchen floor in quite a while. Why don't we play tonight and you can practice? Okay. And then Bill Critchfield walked by my desk, and I think he looked at me. Oh, that is exciting. I know. And that was my mother. I loved being a kid. One day, my mother and I went to visit my grandmother. We're sitting in her den, as we usually did, and my grandmother all of a sudden looks at me, as if with fresh eyes. And she gets up and starts towards me with her hands outstretched. And she says, "Oh, Leslie's got little..." Oh my God, where are we going with this? Bosoms! Bosoms! Oh my God, the most mortifying word on the planet. You have little bosoms! Oh my God, stop saying it! You're becoming a woman, dear. No, no, no. I knew all about that becoming a woman thing. I'd seen the 5th grade girls movie. I knew. It was all wrapped up in starting your period and wearing Kotex pads. And there was something in there about not being able to swim whenever you wanted to. What's up with that? Does that mean no more hopscotch? No more double dutch? No more hide and go seek? No. I wanted to remain a girl forever. Because, see, I had this charmed life. I mean, we had a great house. My parents loved me. I was good in school. I had none of those early childhood traumas that people write their one-woman shows about. And I think because of that, I grew up feeling very safe. Change did not scare me. And I was always willing to leap at the next great opportunity. And so it was, at the ripe old age of 20, that I was the first one in my group of friends to be planning my wedding. I found an older man, 29 to my 20. And when he asked me to marry him, of course I said yes. I mean, it was so romantic. There were dresses to try on, and vows to write, china patterns to pick out. Oh my gosh, I was so excited. I was willing to change colleges, change my major, move 200 miles, ditch roommates, all to become a Mrs. But as the date was getting closer, I felt this rock forming in the pit of my stomach. And I think it started when we were looking for apartments to rent. And I realized how dark and dingy the ones were that we were going to be able to afford. And then I started looking at the man himself. Was this guy going to be able to hold down a job? He'd had 3 since I met him. And then I realized that I was not able to be 100% myself with this man. Oh my God, I did not want to get married. That there was this box of invitations that was sitting on the floor in the dining room, and they were stamped and addressed and ready to go. My wedding dress was already hanging in the closet. My bridesmaids had had their final fittings. We had countless numbers of deposits out there on churches and florists and caterers. No, this train was barreling down the tracks, and there was no stopping it. So I just figured that I would go ahead and get married. And then within a reasonable amount of time, I would just get divorced. Sounded logical to me. So one day, my mother and I are sitting there having our usual debriefing, which, yes, lasted well into my 20s. And we weren't even talking about the wedding. And she says, "You know, Les, if you didn't want to get married, you know you don't have to, right?" I gaped at her. I was trying to decide if she was kidding or not, but all I saw looking back at me was openness and candor. And I burst into tears, and I said, "I don't want to get married." And all she said was, "No problem." And my mother quietly went about canceling the entire event. No mention was made of the embarrassment, the inconvenience, the expense. There was no shame. And I have to say, that was the biggest gift of love that anyone has ever given me. And that was my mother. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. My husband, Guy, and I arrived here 15 minutes ago at 10:45 for our 11 o'clock flight back to the mainland. It's already pretty warm out here, and there is not a tree in sight. But fortunately, we found this makeshift billboard that is casting a narrow swath of shade here in the dirt. And we're hunkered down here just trying to keep cool. So after my aborted wedding attempt, that was when I really got into acting. I would and could play any part on stage. A quiet, mousy type? No problem. A high-class prostitute? No problem. A middle-aged drunk? Well, that was a bit of a stretch. But I loved it. The farther it was from my actual personality, the more I got into it. I could sing, I could dance, I could act. I felt like I had the full package. And I spent much of my young life pursuing that dream. But there's this little problem. You see, in this life, it doesn't matter that I can act. It doesn't matter that I can dance or sing. In this life, what mattered was that I could not cross a stream by jumping over wet rocks to save my life. I could not snorkel without hyperventilating. I did not know the difference between a dark-eyed junco and a rufous-sided towhee. I was not science smart. My city stories weren't interesting in this life. I wasn't funny. And so I stopped telling my stories. My husband, Guy, planned all of our vacations. Some of them better than others, all of them involving the great outdoors, which left me feeling slightly out of my comfort zone at all times. Just one time, I would have loved to have gone to New York City and stayed at a fabulous hotel and gone to a show on Broadway, but that was not how it was to be. And so, I remember the first year that we were married, Guy announced that we were going to spend New Year's Eve camping at the Pinnacles State Park. Well, don't get me wrong, I love the Pinnacles in the summer or in fall or winter, but the Pinnacles on December 31st just sounded kind of cold to me. But that's what we were going to do. So we loaded everybody in the car. He had a 10-year-old son named Russell and a 12-year-old daughter named Elle. And we got in the car, we're all heading off to the Pinnacles, and we're talking about all the things we're going to see and do there. And Guy was telling us about the problem they were having there with the wild boars. Oh. Apparently, the wild boars were taking over native species, and it was a problem. So we were all kind of excited we might actually see some wild boars on this trip. We arrive at the Pinnacles. It's a beautiful day. It's crystal clear, 45 degrees. We start hiking all over, keeping our eyes peeled for the wild boars. We did not see a single one. So that night, when the sun went down, the temperature plummeted. It was freezing cold. So we made this little fire, and we made our little dinner, and then finally we just said, let's just go to bed. So I took the two kids up to the bathroom, and on our way back down the path towards the tent, all of a sudden, we hear this rustling in the bushes. So I shone my flashlight over, and I didn't see anything. So we kept walking, and then we heard it again, only this time it was closer and louder, and then I heard a snarfling sound. And all three of us knew, oh my God, it's the wild boars. Russell takes off at a dead run out into the dark of night. Elle and I throw our arms around each other, and I'm trying to block her from where I am sure this wild boar is going to gore my leg. We're waiting, we can hear it, it's coming closer and closer. closer and louder. The snarfling is, oh my God, it's coming. No, oh my God. And then we hear laughter. The wild boar was gone. Hilarious. Took us 10 minutes to find Russell out in the dark. Elle had somehow ejected her retainer. We never found that. Oh, it was a cold night in the Pinnacles that night. And you should have felt it in our tent. So I'm going to let all these folks come in, because otherwise we'll just, come on in. There's seats over here.
Yeah.
They've traveled from